This video is brought to you by NVIDIA and Gigabyte Aorus, delivering cutting-edge hardware to deliver maximum performance in games like Battlefield 6. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more and maybe even win yourself a brand new custom-built PC featuring an NVIDIA RTX 5070. Alright, I reckon I've put about 25 hours into Battlefield 6 across various open and closed betas, but I've not yet done a dedicated video on it, mostly because I didn't feel like I had too much to add to the conversation. Recently though, EA invited me to test out some of the stuff that hasn't been available to the broader public yet, namely 2 of the game's big maps, Mirror Valley and Operation Firestorm, as well as 3 of the single-player missions. They also gave me a behind-closed-doors presentation of the game's portal mode, plus I got to interview a handful of developers, and that was in addition to our interviewing franchise bosses Vince Zampella and Byron Beat a few weeks back. So I think it's fair to say that EA Dice really threw the doors open to me on this one. I think the fact they did that really signals just how confident they are in this product, because frankly, they have every reason to be. I'm not going to be coy, I have some mixed feelings about the single-player stuff, but on the multiplayer front, I'm a little blown away by how strongly all of this is shaping up. The contrast between this point in the pre-release cycle versus that of 2042 couldn't be more stark. I vividly remember booting up the Battlefield 2042 beta a few years back and immediately thinking to myself, oh no. That was a game that was not ready for launch in any way, shape, or form. It was in such a shoddy technical state that you just knew that it would take months of post-launch patching to get it in shape, but the deeper issues were design-based. That was a Battlefield that was doing all sorts of stuff that no one was asking for, least of all Battlefield fans, and it seemed as though out-of-touch leadership were trying to ram through a vision of Battlefield that was chasing trends that were completely at odds with what Battlefield fans actually wanted. That's something that the developers I spoke to tacitly acknowledged in my interviews with them. While they didn't point the finger at leadership or trend chasing, they did say that Battlefield 2042 was trying a lot of new ideas and that a lot of them just didn't work. And one of the reasons that Battlefield 6 is coming together as well as it is because it's putting its full faith in the enduring underlying appeal of the Battlefield formula. Squad play, big maps transformed by vehicular destruction, small maps with tense choke point showdowns, all of this coalescing dynamically to provide those only in Battlefield moments. That's certainly been my experience during my 25 hours playing Battlefield 6, with the return of dedicated classes as opposed to specialists, and with plenty of seamlessly integrated squad UI systems that make communication and deployment really easy. It genuinely feels like you're playing the game wrong if you don't work with your squad, and that's exactly the way it should be. You can always lone wolf it if you want to, but frankly, if that's your style of play, then Battlefield really isn't meant for you. The gadget and ammo economy is tuned such that if you're looking to be truly effective on the field, you need to rely on other players, and that's been one of Battlefield's biggest strengths, not only because it adds texture to the gameplay loop, but because it also facilitates some really healthy social interactions that are increasingly hard to find in this modern era of multiplayer games, where individual agency is often prioritized over team play for fear that baking cooperation into a gameplay loop may result in frustration or toxicity when that team isn't gelling. But even on a more individual level, the return of class identity feels great because you immediately know what your job is versus someone else's job, and you can just get on with it. There's no confusion or disagreement about who should be doing what. The way you measure success in your role is super clear. If you select engineer, then it is your job to repair the tank because that's what you were born to do. And that clarity lets you sink into that role with confidence because you know that when you've got that repair torch out and you're keeping that tank alive, you are doing the Lord's work, and thank God for you. So that's a nice line break from 2042, but there are 2 parts of Battlefield 6 that do remind me of 2042. The first is EA Dice's decisions not to tie weapons to classes in the main game modes. If anyone's not familiar with this, classes in Battlefield games have always been a combination of gadgets and weapons, so that only recons can use snipers and only supports can use LMGs, for example. This made for a very robust class identity. Battlefield 6 decouples weapons from classes such that an assault can use a sniper rifle, and recons can use SMGs. EA Dice have implemented game modes where weapons are tied to specific classes, but it appears as though the default Battlefield experience that most people will be queuing into will utilize unlocked weaponry. The reason this reminds me of 2042 is because the community has been really clear about this. They don't want this at all. they want the default experience to be locked weapons, and EA Dice's refusal to acquiesce is basically the only example I can think of them trying to ram something through that's at odds with community sentiment. I will say that it isn't the biggest deal in the world though. I've seen some very upvoted Reddit threads that say this like unlocked weapon things will completely ruin Battlefield 6, and I certainly don't agree with that, but I do think locked weapons do provide deeper class immersion, more trade-offs in your decision making, and it'll make it easier for EA Dice to balance both classes and weapons in the future, since you're going to have a more narrow pool of variables to manage. I think that it's just fundamentally a better Battlefield when weapons are locked down, but it's not a deal breaker, so I won't die in a ditch over it. The other thing that reminds me of 2042 in Battlefield 6 that I will die in a ditch over though is server browser. EA Dice have confirmed that Portal mode will have a server browser, but core matchmaking will not. And that totally sucks for many, many reasons, but the biggest one for me personally is that without a server browser, it's incredibly difficult to find match-made games in low population regions like OCE in the post-launch period. I tried to go back and play 2042 recently, and I legitimately couldn't get a game in any of the match-made playlists because there wasn't enough people on, and you couldn't let a server slowly build with people idling in there until the required number was reached. Portal has a server browser, but core playlists don't, and that immediately splits the player base, and it's like, what are we doing here? A server browser with a matchmaking option that dumps you into official servers that are viewable in the server browser is the best of both worlds, and we know that works because that's what Battlefield 4 did, and literally no one asked for it to change. I can't understand why EA Dice is so unwilling to deliver a feature that is core to the Battlefield experience, so hopefully they can retrofit the work they've done on the Portal server browser onto the core playlists. One area where Battlefield 6 was copying a lot of flack during its various beta tests was map design and map size. Most of the maps available during the betas were smaller maps, and while the Siege of Cairo feels destined to be a fan favorite, the Empire State map set on the streets of Brooklyn was getting a lot less love, with people complaining about its rabbit warren-like design without any interesting choke points to really up the intensity. Liberation Peak was the map that people really hated though, since its medium size made vehicles a little awkward to use, and its many sniper nests made it frustrating to play as infantry. It does feel like this map needs some changes before launch, so yeah, I personally wasn't having a great time on this one either. So those were the maps available during the public test, but EA Dice also invited me to check out two of the other big maps available at launch, Myrick Valley and Operation Firestorm. Firestorm being a remake of the map featured in Battlefield 3. Interestingly, in my interviews with EA Dice staff, they all said that remaking a Battlefield map is harder than designing a new one, because every change versus the original is so fiercely debated by everyone involved, whereas with a new map, it doesn't matter where you put a door or a crate or whatever, because it's a completely blank slate. I never actually played much of Battlefield 3 since I started playing properly in Battlefield 4, so I don't have any nostalgia goggles on when I say that I really loved Operation Firestorm, and it feels like it holds up all these years later. It felt a little similar to the other big map I got to experience, Myrick Valley. It had a similar size and a similar configuration, in that it had a big central structure that would naturally pull people toward it, and plenty of wide open space around it for vehicles to operate in. This is the map that I had the most fun in by far. It just had a fantastic mix of big and small spaces. Its layout lets air and ground vehicles operate well. There was a nice amount of distance between capture points without it being too much runtime, which is something that really plagued Battlefield 2042's maps. I loved it, I really did, and if EA Dice can keep serving up more big maps of this quality, Battlefield 6 is going to have a very bright future ahead of it. Something else I got to try during the closed test was a new game mode called Escalation. The way this works is that it's another capture the point mode, but in order to score, one team needs to hold 3 capture points for a certain amount of time. As the game goes on, 2 things happen. The first is that certain capture points are removed, which has an effect similar to a shrinking circle in a Battle Royale game. The other thing that happens is that more vehicles are available at spawn, and by the end of the round, there are a lot of vehicles and not a lot of capture points, so things get really crazy. The developers I spoke to were really pumped about this mode, one of them saying that they even prefer it to classic Conquest. I think it's going to be very hard to displace Conquest as the default Battlefield experience, but I do think this was a really fun game mode that I can see getting some traction, because vehicle availability is a regular pain point for more casual Battlefield fans, and this one goes a long way towards alleviating that, and the increased intensity of the shrinking map definitely results in some tense final moments. Of course, if you don't like that game mode, you can just take Randy Pitchford's advice and build your own, and that brings us to Portal. Now, to be clear, I did not get the chance to go hands-on with any Portal content. I was only shown a behind-the-scenes Vidoc presentation that was kind of like a longer version of some of the stuff they'd already shown. If you haven't been paying attention to this stuff, Battlefield 6's Portal is nothing like 2042's Portal. This is much more ambitious in that it's leveraging Godot development tools, giving modders way more flexibility to modify different aspects of the experience. There are sliders and toggles, sure, but there's also the ability to manipulate level geometry and resize assets. EA Dice showed off just some of what you could do with these tools, one level being a parkour more focused game mode. I think EA DICE did better work with Mirror's Edge, but hey, it's something. More impressive was this mode called Bomb Defusal. See if the map design seems a little familiar. Meanwhile, this top of the world map definitely reminded me of the sort of shit I used to play back in the Unreal Tournament days. And they even have some vehicle racing in the mix too. So all of this is generally fine, but to be honest, none of it is really making me go, holy shit, I want to play that. The good news though is that these tools seem to be flexible enough to allow people with sufficient skill and imagination to create those sorts of experiences. User-generated content is the business right now. EA reportedly want over 100 million people playing Battlefield 6, and if they're going to hit that number, it'll probably be because someone creates some insanely addictive game mode in Portal, and then EA spin that off as its own free-to-play experience. I'll tell you what's probably not going to get this franchise to 100 million players though, the single-player campaign.
The Matrix under attack. Disembark now.
Marines, get in! We need to get clear of the ship now!
Now look, I don't want to over-egg the pudding with this one. I don't think this single-player campaign is bad, but so far it seems to be weaker than the rest of the package, partly because the rest of the package looks phenomenal, and partly because the single-player stuff just looks a little meh. So I got to play through 3 campaign missions here, and accompanying each of them was a little primer on the story thus far. The story is that some paramilitary group called the Pax Armata are just operating freely on US soil and other territories as well, I guess. But it's a little hard to get bought into that premise, if I'm honest. Like, if this were a proxy war against the Russians in Georgia or something, I'd buy it. But a fully armed paramilitary group running around the streets of New York City, it's just a little harder to buy that. Similarly, I think the characters I was meeting were all a little sourceless, but without playing through the full experience, I'm reluctant to judge that stuff. The missions themselves were a bit easier to judge because they're pretty straightforward affairs. First one was a beach landing that opened with a very, very lengthy turret sequence.
Shit! Stone! Lopez! Eyes front!
After that, I had to escort a tank through the town, and in this mission I was playing as the engineer, so it was my job to keep this tank operational while it was being pummeled by RPGs.
Down the stairs, through the alleyway. Twist through. Copy.
After that, we arrive at this expansive town hall plaza that we need to seize control of before storming the building to capture a vital asset.
Incoming!
So from this mission, I got the sense that the campaign was acting as a sort of tutorial that was introducing me to the role of each class, and I think that's a good goal to have for a campaign experience. The other thing I felt it was doing really well was capturing the absolute chaos of Battlefield, and it was delivering it in a single-player framework. When I was escorting that tank through the town and I was being hammered by rockets and I was desperately pumping that repair tool, it felt like those clutch moments in the multiplayer, and I can't imagine it would have been easy to recreate that given how much those moments are reliant on human improvisation. But the cracks were really showing in some key areas, particularly enemy AI, where the enemy troops were incredibly stupid, half a step up from Lemmings really. Commanding your fellow squad mates was also really janky and honestly felt kind of pointless. There was also just a sense that the story and mission design and set pieces weren't really coalescing to create any aura, for want of a better term. Definitely felt that in the next mission, which was kind of like that clearing house mission from Call of Duty, to the point where it felt a little on the nose, if I'm honest, and it was just way less good, like way less. It eventually unfolded into a broader mission across the Brooklyn rooftops before eventually ending up on a collapsing bridge, which was basically a set of narrow corridors. I don't know. The mission just felt like it was kind of aping Call of Duty and Spider-Man more than being its own original thing. The mission I enjoyed the most was actually this one, set on this massive map, and I was playing as a recon, and we had to make our way across the landscape to take out a number of SAM sites. This one gave you a huge amount of choice with how you approach the mission objectives, since you could go in all guns blazing, or you could snipe from afar, or you could use your drone to drop payloads on troops.
How's it looking, Gecko?
Eye in the sky, advancing. Hostiles down.
But this mission also had its own head-scratching moments, like this one where I had to use guided missiles to take out an approaching convoy, something that should have been fun as hell but ended up being, like, comically boring.
Keep up the pressure. Well executed, Gecko. That armor's toast.
Ultimately though, this mission ends on a dam, which, surprise surprise, has to be blown up, resulting in a pretty exciting finish. I definitely seen some online chatter about these campaign missions and how they're terrible and embarrassing or whatever. I just don't agree with that. I think they're fine. Most people aren't buying Battlefield games for their campaign missions. They're buying it for everything else. It'd be nice if these missions were a Titanfall 2 level campaign experience, and maybe they will be, in the sense that I've only experienced a handful of them so far. But 3 missions in, I have very realistic expectations about this campaign. I'll put it that way. But I'll be real, I have very, very high expectations for Battlefield 6 as a complete package. Core multiplayer experience is looking to deliver almost everything that fans of the series have been asking for. The technical state is exceptional. This thing runs super well on PCs of all levels and consoles. Sound design maintains the high quality bar that EA DICE are famous for. Map quality is there for both big and small maps. Portal tools look extremely powerful and give the community the chance to experiment with the Battlefield sandbox. And there's also the Battle Royale mode, which is confirmed, but EA DICE aren't officially talking about that one yet. But given how massive that genre is, and given what's possible in the Battlefield sandbox, I can see that gaining plenty of traction, especially since it's probably going to be free to play, or at least that's the rumor. So yeah, that's Battlefield 6, or at least that's what I've played of it. It's out on October 10th. I'll definitely be playing a bunch of it when it launches, so do look forward to a full review then. Oh, and if you want to get ready for it, you might want to think about upgrading your GPU thanks to this video's sponsors, Nvidia and Gigabyte Aorus. Now, to be clear, Battlefield 6 does run really well on a variety of hardware configurations, but it is the sort of game that has a lot more to offer if you have the right hardware, like hardware from this video's sponsors, Nvidia and Gigabyte Aorus. I think it's useful to take a look at some of the technology that Nvidia hardware enables in Battlefield 6 because there's a lot of it, and all of it massively increases both performance and fidelity. The headline feature is DLSS 4, which is Nvidia's most advanced super resolution technology to date. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, but long story short, it's technology that utilizes AI to upscale images, and in so doing, it gives your machine vastly more performance headroom without sacrificing any image quality. If you are looking to play a game like Battlefield at the highest possible resolution and the highest possible frame rate, DLSS 4 is going to be the tech that's going to be doing most of the heavy lifting. But you can take your frame rate even higher with NVIDIA multi-frame generation, which again utilizes AI to interlace additional frames in between those being natively rendered, which can massively increase frame rates, but more importantly, it can push you up to whatever frame rate you need to match the refresh rate of your TV or monitor, which is going to result in a way smoother experience. Battlefield 6 also supports NVIDIA Reflex, which is technology that reduces system latency, making gameplay feel snappy and responsive, and all of this comes with the raw power and throughput of NVIDIA hardware, the undisputed market leaders in GPU tech. If this sort of cutting-edge technology is what you're after, then I really recommend checking out Gigabyte's award-winning range of 50 series GPUs. Their Hawk fan design is specifically engineered to maximize both air pressure and the amount of air circulating through your GPU, and its composite liquid metal componentry keeps temperatures down while keeping frame rates up. It's got server-grade thermal conductive gel for improved VRAM temperatures, as well as a large vapor chamber, superconductive heat pipes, and an angular thermal fin design. Plus, there's nice little flourishes like customizable RGB and even an EdgeView LCD display for GPU stats or things like text or images or GIFs. Best of all, as I mentioned earlier, Gigabyte are feeling generous, so they're actually giving away a custom-built PC featuring a Gigabyte Aorus GeForce 5070 Eagle housed in a Cooler Master Elite 490 case, cooled by a Cooler Master Master Liquid 360 cooler, and powered by a Cooler Master MWE Gold 850 watt PSU. You do have to be residing in either Australia or New Zealand to be eligible for this, so if you are, click the competition entry form in the description below to get started, or if you just want to take a look at Gigabyte's award-winning range of 50 series GPUs, I'll leave a link to their product lineup down below as well. Thanks Nvidia and Gigabyte Aorus for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.